Single dad lost his dream job, helping a rich woman in the rain. She was the CEO who just hired him for 6 figures. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Jack stared at the dashboard notifications, lighting up his Honda Civic like a Christmas tree from hell. Payment due flashed in angry red letters next to Zoe's therapy appointment reminder. Bank account overdraft blinked underneath. Permit renewal final notice glowed at the bottom. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as the GPS announced in that annoyingly cheerful voice, "Destination ahead on your right. TechFlow Dynamics. The building that could save everything." Through the windshield, Seattle's spring storm hammered the streets with the kind of rain that made people run for cover. March weather in the Pacific Northwest meant anything could happen, but this felt biblical. Jax glanced at the clock. 1:47 p.m., 13 minutes to change his life. That morning, Zoe had looked up from her cereal with those huge brown eyes that still held too much sadness for a 7-year-old. She'd pointed to the news on his phone showing a car accident, then made the sign they'd developed for helping. "Why don't people help anymore, Daddy?" She hadn't spoken the words. Zoe hadn't spoken any words in 18 months, not since the accident that took Sarah away, but her question lived in those eyes every single day. The traffic crawled forward at the pace of frozen honey. Jax drummed his fingers on the wheel, mentally rehearsing his interview answers. Marcus had pulled serious strings to get him this meeting with TechFlow's innovation team. Former Microsoft colleagues didn't just call in favors for anyone. This job could cover Zoe's specialized therapy, the kind that could help her find her voice again. 1:48. The line of cars ahead hadn't moved in 3 minutes. Through the sheets of rain, brake lights stretched endlessly toward the intersection. Jax leaned forward, trying to see what was causing the holdup. That's when he spotted the silver Tesla sitting sideways across 2 lanes, hazard lights blinking like a cry for help. A woman in a dark business suit stood beside the car, her jacket soaked through, trying to push the vehicle toward the curb. Rain plastered her blonde hair to her head as she struggled against the Tesla's weight. Her laptop bag slipped toward the rushing water collecting at the storm drain. 1:49. Jax's jaw clenched. 11 minutes to get to TechFlow, check in with security, find the right conference room, and somehow not look like he'd swum there. The woman stumbled as her heels slipped on the wet asphalt. She caught herself against the car's hood, then immediately went back to pushing, stubborn, determined, completely outmatched by basic physics. Zoe's voice echoed in his memory. "Why don't people help anymore?" Sarah's voice joined it, soft and warm, like it always was during their Sunday morning talks. "What kind of man do you want Zoe to remember her daddy being?" 1:50. Jax pulled the Honda to the curb and hit the hazard lights. 10 minutes to save his career. One woman who needed help more than he needed that job. No contest. He grabbed his emergency kit from the trunk and jogged toward the Tesla, rain instantly soaking through his interview shirt. The woman looked up as he approached, and for a split second, something flickered in her green eyes. Surprise? Relief? He couldn't tell through the downpour, but she didn't stop pushing. "Hey, you need some help." The woman stopped pushing and straightened up, water dripping from her chin. Up close, Jax could see she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe late 20s, with the kind of intense focus he recognized from his Microsoft days. The rain had turned her business suit into a soggy mess, but she still looked more put together than most people did on their best day. "I can handle it," she said, then immediately tried to push the car again. The Tesla didn't budge. Jax set down his emergency kit and pulled out jumper cables. "That makes sense. But maybe we can handle it faster together." She paused, studying him with those sharp green eyes. "You're going to get soaked." "Already there," Jax said, gesturing to his dripping shirt. "Besides, my daughter taught me something this morning about helping people. The woman's expression softened slightly. How old is your daughter? 7. Going on 37 when it comes to life lessons. A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. What did she teach you? That good people help each other, even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient, the woman said quietly. Jax popped the Tesla's hood and immediately spotted the problem. Hybrid batteries flooded, but the connections look intact. The rain got into the charging port and triggered the safety shutdown. You know Tesla Systems. Used to work at Microsoft. We partnered with them on some automotive projects. This should just take a few minutes to reset. The woman stepped closer, watching him work. You're very calm for someone standing in a flood. My wife used to say I had 2 speeds, steady and asleep. Used to. She died in a car accident 18 months ago. Now it's just me and Zoe. The woman went very still. I'm sorry. That must be incredibly difficult. Some days are harder than others. But Zoe's taught me that helping people when they need it. That's what keeps the good stuff alive in the world. Jax connected the cables and checked the Tesla's display. The system began its restart sequence, progress bar crawling across the screen. The woman watched the display, then looked at him. What's your name? Jax Rivera. And I'm guessing you've got somewhere important to be, just like I do. Sage Montgomery. And yes, I have a meeting that could determine whether my company survives the next 30 days. Jax glanced at his phone. 1:56. That makes 2 of us with impossible timing. The Tesla's display chimed. System reset complete. Sage slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine purred to life, smooth and quiet. She rolled down the window. Thank you, Jax Rivera. How much do I owe you? Nothing, just help someone else when you can. Sage reached for her purse anyway, but stopped when she noticed the folder on his passenger seat. The TechFlow Dynamics logo was clearly visible through the rain-spotted windshield. You work at TechFlow. Job interview, actually. Was supposed to be there 3 minutes ago. Something shifted in her expression, but before Jax could figure out what it was, she was studying his face like she was memorizing it. What kind of work do you do? Software engineering. Accessibility focus. I like solving problems that help people navigate technology better. Sage nodded slowly. That's important work. I think so. Technology should serve everyone, not just the people who designed it. She glanced at the TechFlow folder again, then back at his face. Jax Rivera, she repeated, like she was filing the name away somewhere important. The rain drummed against the car roof as they looked at each other through the window. Something passed between them, a moment of recognition that neither quite understood. You should go, Sage said finally. Your interview. Jax checked his phone. 1:58. Yeah, good luck with your meeting. Good luck with yours. Sage drove away, her Tesla cutting smoothly through the flooded street. Jax watched her taillights disappear around the corner, then looked down at his soaked shirt and muddy hands. He thought about Zoe's drawing that morning, the one where stick figures helped each other under storm clouds. Sarah had always said that doing the right thing had its own kind of timing. 2:00 arrived as Jax pulled into the TechFlow parking garage, but somehow, as he walked toward the elevator, he didn't feel like he'd lost anything at all. The TechFlow Dynamics lobby gleamed with the kind of modern elegance that said, "We're successful but not flashy about it." Glass and steel reached toward a skylight that would have been beautiful on any day when the sky wasn't dumping an ocean on Seattle. Jax approached the reception desk, water still dripping from his jacket sleeves. The young woman behind the desk looked up with professional politeness that didn't quite hide her surprise at his soggy appearance. Jax Rivera for a 2:00 with Marcus Webb, he said, offering what he hoped was a confident smile. She checked her computer screen, then glanced at the clock. It's 12 minutes past 2. Mr. Rivera, I know. I'm sorry. There was a situation with someone who needed help. The receptionist studied his face, and something in his expression must have convinced her he wasn't making excuses. Let me call up to Mr. Webb's office. She picked up her phone and spoke quietly. After a moment, she hung up and gave him an apologetic look. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rivera. Mr. Webb had to move to his next appointment. Company policy requires all interviews to begin on time." Jax felt something heavy settle in his stomach, but he kept his voice steady. "I understand completely. Is there any way I could reschedule? I can check his calendar, but—" She looked at her screen and shook her head. "He's booked solid for the next 3 weeks. That's okay. I brought my portfolio anyway. Would it be possible for someone to review it?" "Of course." The receptionist reached for the folder he offered. "I'll make sure it gets to the right people. Thank you." "I really appreciate that," she smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. For what it's worth, most people would have just made an excuse about the weather. Most people don't have daughters who ask tough questions about helping others. The receptionist laughed softly. "She sounds like a smart kid. Too smart sometimes. But yeah, she's pretty amazing." As Jax turned to leave, he caught a glimpse of something that made him pause. Through the glass walls of a conference room on the second floor, he could see a blonde woman in a dark suit addressing a group of serious-looking people around a table. Even from this distance, even through the rain-spotted glass, he recognized the way she held herself, the same determination he'd seen beside the broken-down Tesla, Sage Montgomery, the woman who'd said her meeting could determine whether her company survived the next 30 days. Jack stared up at the conference room, pieces of a puzzle sliding into place in his mind. The TechFlow logo, her intense focus, the way she'd studied his interview folder like it meant something. The receptionist followed his gaze. "That's our CEO, Sage Montgomery. She's presenting to the board about some big expansion project." "CEO," Jax repeated quietly. "She's amazing. Built this whole company from nothing. Started in her dorm room at UW, and now we've got over 500 employees." Jax watched as Sage gestured toward a presentation screen, her body language confident and commanding. Even through the glass, he could see she owned that room. "She looks like she knows what she's doing." "Oh, she does. Everyone here would follow her anywhere. She really cares about people, you know, not just profits." "That makes sense," Jack said, remembering the way Sage had asked about Zoe, the gentleness in her voice when he'd mentioned Sarah. The receptionist handed him a business card. "If you want to follow up about other opportunities, just call that number. We're always looking for good people. Thank you." Jax walked back through the lobby, his wet shoes squeaking slightly on the polished floor. At the entrance, he turned back for one more look at the conference room. Sage was pointing to something on the screen now, her face animated with the kind of passion he recognized. It was the same expression she'd worn when she'd said that technology should serve everyone. The same expression he saw in the mirror when he talked about accessibility software. The revolving door spun him out into the rain, which had softened to a steady drizzle. Jax sat in his Honda for a moment, processing everything that had happened in the last hour. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Heard what happened. Don't worry, man. There might be another way." Jack stared at the message, then looked back up at the TechFlow building. Through the conference room window, Sage Montgomery was still presenting to her board, still fighting for her company's future, just like he was fighting for his daughter's. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking garage, but something told him this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The TechFlow boardroom felt like a battlefield disguised as a business meeting. Sage Montgomery stood at the head of the mahogany table, her wet suit exchanged for a crisp navy blazer, her damp hair swept back into the kind of bun that meant serious business. 12 board members sat around the table like judges at a trial. Half of them wore expressions that suggested they'd already made up their minds about the hostile takeover offer from Data Corp Industries. "Gentlemen," Sage said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made people forget she was the youngest person in the room. "My company isn't for sale at any price." Board member Harrison leaned back in his leather chair. "Sage, be realistic. Data Corp's offer is 40% above market value. Your shareholders deserve consideration. My shareholders deserve a company that maintains its values, not one that gets stripped for parts. From her seat at Sage's right, Rebecca Kim nodded approvingly. As co, Rebecca had been Sage's mentor since the early days when TechFlow operated out of a shared workspace in Capitol Hill. What about the employees? Another board member asked. Data Corp's made it clear they plan to eliminate redundancies. You mean they plan to fire 300 people to boost their profit margins? Sage replied. That's exactly why we're not selling. Harrison spread his hands. Sage, you're thinking with your heart instead of your head. Business is business. Actually, Harrison, I'm thinking with 8 years of data that proves employee loyalty drives long-term profitability. But I understand if that's too complex for a quarterly profits mindset. Rebecca suppressed a smile. Around the table, several board members shifted uncomfortably. The presentation screen lit up with TechFlow's growth projections. Sage clicked to the next slide, showing innovation pipeline metrics. Here's what Data Corp's acquisition team doesn't understand, Sage continued. They see our accessibility division as a nice-to-have feature. I see it as the future of inclusive technology. She thought about the conversation with Jax Rivera, his quiet passion when he'd said that technology should serve everyone. Even soaked to the skin and late for his interview, he'd understood something that billion-dollar corporations missed. The accessibility market is projected to reach $58 billion by 2026, Sage said, advancing to the next slide. Companies that ignore inclusive design will be left behind. That's assuming you can execute, Harrison said. Your current team lacks the specialized expertise for that kind of expansion. Sage paused, her finger hovering over the presentation remote. In her mind, she saw Jax's steady hands working on the Tesla's electrical system, his calm competence, the way he'd diagnosed the problem in seconds and fixed it without drama. That's where you're wrong, Harrison. The talent exists. We just need to recognize it when we see it. After the meeting ended, Sage retreated to her corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Rebecca followed, closing the door behind them. That was beautifully handled, Rebecca said, settling into the chair across from Sage's desk. But Harrison's not wrong about needing specialized talent. Sage pulled up TechFlow's HR system on her computer. I know exactly where to find it. Oh, pull every file on Jackson Rivera. Full background check, references, the works. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Should I ask why? He's the man I met today, the one who stopped to help when he had every reason to keep driving. You want to hire someone based on a roadside interaction. I want to hire someone based on character, competence, and the kind of instincts that put helping people ahead of personal advancement. Sage clicked through screens until she found Jax's interview file. The portfolio photos showed accessibility software interfaces that were elegant and intuitive. User testimonials praised designs that made technology genuinely usable for people with disabilities. Look at this work. Rebecca, this isn't just good engineering, it's empathetic engineering. Rebecca leaned forward to study the screen. These interfaces are beautiful, clean, functional, thoughtful. Former Microsoft, 6 years in accessibility development. Holds 3 patents on adaptive interface design. Volunteer coding instructor for kids with learning differences. So why is he applying for mid-level positions? Sage scrolled through his employment history. Left Microsoft 18 months ago. No major projects since then. There's a gap. Family reasons, probably. You said he mentioned a daughter and a wife who died in a car accident. The office went quiet except for the rain pattering against the windows. Rebecca's expression softened. He's been out of the industry for over a year, caring for his child, which means he's had time to think about what matters. And today, when he had to choose between his career and helping a stranger, he chose helping. Sage stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street where Jax had worked on her car in the pouring rain. 3 floors below, traffic moved normally now, no sign of the morning's chaos. But she remembered the steady confidence in his voice, the way he'd handled a crisis without drama or self-importance, the gentleness when he'd talked about his daughter. "What are you thinking?" Rebecca asked. "I'm thinking that Data Corp wants to buy us because they're afraid of companies that put humanity first. And I'm thinking Jax Rivera represents exactly the kind of innovation they can't replicate. So what's your plan?" Sage turned back to her desk and picked up her phone. "Simple. I'm going to offer him the opportunity to prove that character and competence matter more than corporate politics." She dialed the number from his application. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Hello? Jax Rivera. This is Sage Montgomery, CEO of TechFlow Dynamics. I believe we met in the rain." There was a pause, then a soft laugh. "I was wondering if you'd figured that out." "Oh, I figured it out. The question is, are you ready to hear about the opportunity you earned today?" Sage smiled as she heard the change in his voice, the shift from uncertainty to focused attention. "I'm listening. Good. Because I have a proposition that could change everything." 3 hours after the board meeting ended, Sage Montgomery sat alone in her corner office, surrounded by the digital equivalent of detective work. Rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows as Seattle settled into another grey afternoon, but Sage barely noticed the weather. Her computer screen displayed multiple windows filled with information about Jackson Rivera, and each new detail confirmed what her instincts had already told her. This man was exactly what TechFlow needed. Microsoft employment records showed 6 years of stellar performance reviews. Project lead on 3 major accessibility initiatives that had collectively served over 2 million users. Patents filed for adaptive interface technologies that were still considered cutting-edge today. His supervisor evaluations read like love letters to his technical competence and collaborative leadership, but the personal references were what made Sage lean forward in her chair, coffee growing cold as she read. Elena Martinez, pediatric therapist, had written, "Jax has shown remarkable dedication to understanding his daughter's therapeutic needs. He researches treatment options thoroughly and advocates effectively for her care. His technical background allows him to suggest creative solutions that bridge therapy and technology. In 18 months of working with this family, I have never seen him lose patience or give up hope." Dr. Sarah Chen from Seattle Children's Hospital. "Mr. Rivera developed a custom communication app for his daughter that has helped several of our young patients. He refuses payment, saying his goal is simply helping kids find their voices. The app's interface is intuitive enough for children with processing delays, yet sophisticated enough to grow with them. This is professional-grade work donated out of pure generosity." Sage clicked through screenshots of the app. The interface was beautiful in its simplicity. Gentle colors that wouldn't overwhelm sensitive eyes, intuitive navigation that required no reading skills, pictures that could be combined to express complex emotions. She could see Jax's programming elegance in every screen, but more than that, she could see a father's love translated into code. The app had sections for basic needs, emotions, activities, and people. But what struck Sage was the advanced section, complex sentence builders that allowed for nuanced communication. This wasn't a simple picture board. This was a comprehensive language system designed by someone who understood both technology and human development. A soft knock interrupted her research. Rebecca Kim entered without waiting for permission, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression that meant she had news. "I made some calls to Microsoft," Rebecca said, settling into her usual chair across from Sage's desk. Jax Rivera was their rising star in accessibility development until he requested extended family leave 18 months ago. "What did you find out?" His direct supervisor cried when I explained why I was calling, literally cried. said losing Jax was like losing their conscience and their best problem solver in the same day. Sage minimized the app screenshots and turned to face Rebecca fully. "Tell me everything." His wife died in a car accident on I-405 during evening rush hour. Daughter was in the car but survived with minor injuries. Physically, emotionally, she stopped speaking completely after the trauma. "Selective mutism," Sage said quietly. "I saw that mentioned in the therapist's notes." Jax immediately took leave to help her through the recovery. And when Microsoft couldn't guarantee the flexible schedule he needed long-term, he resigned without hesitation. No negotiation, no counteroffers. His daughter needed him, so he chose her. Sage felt something tighten in her chest. He gave up his career to take care of her. Gets better or worse, depending how you look at it. Rebecca pulled out her phone and scrolled through notes. He started a food truck business because it gave him complete schedule control. But Seattle's permit system has been brutal lately, and he's been fighting to keep his location for months. The city wants to relocate him to a less desirable spot that would kill his customer base. So he's been out of tech for over a year, trying to make it as a food truck owner while caring for a traumatized child and fighting bureaucracy. Rebecca nodded. "And from what I can tell, he's been struggling financially. Insurance covered his wife's medical expenses before she died, but didn't cover much of the ongoing therapy his daughter needs. The specialized treatment she requires costs $1,800 per month. That's more than most people's rent, which explains why he was interviewing for positions that are frankly beneath his skill level. He needs income stability more than intellectual challenge." Sage stared out her window at the Seattle skyline, watching office lights flicker on as afternoon faded into evening. She thought about the man who'd fixed her car in the rain, his steady competence and quiet dignity. He'd been calm, focused entirely on solving the problem. No mention of his own troubles, no hint that helping her had cost him a job opportunity he desperately needed. "What's his food truck like?" Rebecca smiled for the first time since entering the office. "Called Code and Tacos, parked near Seattle Center most days. Reviews are fascinating to read. People talk about the food, which is apparently excellent, but what they really remember is how he treats customers, especially kids." "How so?" "He teaches basic coding concepts while people wait for their orders, turns the lunch rush into impromptu computer science lessons. Parents love it because their kids learn something. Kids love it because he makes programming feel like games instead of work." "Of course he does." Sage smiled despite the weight of what she was planning. "Rebecca, I need you to clear my calendar for tomorrow afternoon." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that the best way to evaluate talent is to see it in action, and I'm thinking that Jackson Rivera has been auditing for this company without even knowing it." "Sage," Rebecca said carefully, "please tell me you're not about to make a hiring decision based on a roadside encounter and some online research." "I'm about to make a hiring decision based on character, competence, and the kind of instincts that prioritize helping people over personal advancement. The roadside encounter just happened to reveal all three. The Data Corp meeting is next week. We need demonstrable progress on innovation to justify rejecting their offer, which is exactly why I need someone who can innovate with purpose instead of just innovating for headlines. Jax Rivera understands that technology should serve humanity. That's not something you can teach in corporate training seminars." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, studying Sage's face. "You're not just impressed by his work, are you?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, there's something in your voice when you talk about him. Something beyond professional appreciation." Sage felt heat creep up her neck. "He's exactly the kind of person this company was built to support and empower." "Of course, I'm passionate about that." Just be careful, okay? Mixing business decisions with personal feelings can get complicated quickly. This is purely a business decision." Rebecca stood to leave, then paused at the door. "For what it's worth, if he's half as impressive in person as he sounds on paper, hiring him would be brilliant." Just make sure you're hiring him for the right reasons. After Rebecca left, Sage returned to her research, but found herself distracted by questions that had nothing to do with professional qualifications. What was it like to lose a life partner and have to rebuild everything around a child's needs? How did someone maintain such apparent grace under that kind of pressure? And why did she find herself wondering what it would be like to have someone in her life who made decisions based on what was right rather than what was advantageous? The next morning brought typical Seattle drizzle, the kind of persistent mist that made tourists buy overpriced rain jackets and made locals ignore either entirely. Sage dressed down in dark jeans and a grey sweater, pulled her hair into a casual ponytail, and drove her Tesla towards Seattle Center. She found Code and Tacos parked in the small lot near the Space Needle, surrounded by lunch-seeking office workers and tourists brave enough to venture out in the rain. Even from a distance, she could see Jax through the truck's service window, moving with the same steady efficiency she'd witnessed during their roadside encounter. The line wasn't long, maybe 10 people, but Sage noticed something interesting as she joined it. Conversations were happening, real conversations, not just order-taking. The atmosphere around the truck felt relaxed and friendly in a way that most food service interactions didn't. A young mother with a toddler reached the window ahead of Sage. The little boy was crying, overwhelmed by the crowd and the noise of the nearby construction. "Hey there, buddy," Jack said, his voice gentle and patient. "That's a lot of people around here, isn't it?" The toddler peeked over his mother's shoulder at Jax, tears still streaming down his chubby cheeks. "You know what I do when there are too many people? I count something simple, like colors. Can you see something red?" The boy pointed at a red umbrella held by a woman near the Space Needle. "Perfect. Now something blue." The child's crying slowed as he searched the crowd. "Blue coat," he said, pointing at a man waiting for the monorail. "Excellent detective work. You're really good at this. What about yellow?" By the time the mother had placed her order and received her food, the toddler was giggling and waving goodbye. Other customers in line were smiling, the mood lighter than when Sage had arrived. An elderly man stepped up next, moving slowly with a walker. Instead of showing impatience, Jax leaned on the counter and waited. "Good afternoon, Mr. Peterson. The usual today. You remember my order, Korean BBQ tacos, no cilantro, extra lime?" "How could I forget?" "And Mrs. Peterson sends her regards about the arthritis app recommendation. That thing is a miracle. She can actually track her pain levels now, without having to remember everything. Makes the doctor visits so much more helpful. I'm glad it's working. Technology should make life easier, not more complicated." When her turn came, Sage found herself looking into the same brown eyes that had studied her Tesla's diagnostic screen with such focus. Up close, she could see laugh lines at the corners of his eyes and the kind of weathered hands that came from real work. "Good afternoon," Jack said, no sign of recognition crossing his face. "What can I get for you today? What do you recommend?" "Depends what you're in the mood for. The Korean BBQ tacos are popular with the tech crowd because they're handheld and won't drip on keyboards. But if you want something that'll actually make your day better, try the verde chicken. I make the sauce from my wife's recipe." There was no sadness in his voice when he mentioned his wife, just a quiet warmth that suggested happy memories had outlasted grief. Sage filed that away as another sign of emotional resilience. "Verde chicken sounds perfect. And maybe you could tell me about those coding lessons I heard about." Jax grinned, the first genuinely bright expression she'd seen from him. "You heard about that? It's nothing formal, just something I do while people wait. Kids get bored, and basic programming concepts are actually pretty simple if you explain them right. I work in tech. I'd love to see how you explain it. Really, most adults think it's silly." Sage leaned against the counter. "Try me." A girl about 10 years old bounced up to the window with her father. She had bright pink streaks in her hair and wore a t-shirt that said, "Future Engineer" in glittery letters. "Perfect timing," Jack said to Sage, then turned to the girl. "Hey Maya, ready for today's lesson?" "Yes, last time you taught me about loops." "That's right. Today let's talk about conditionals. That means teaching the computer to make decisions." Jax pulled out a small whiteboard from inside the truck and drew a simple flowchart. Maya leaned forward eagerly while her father placed his order. "So if we're programming a robot to make tacos, we might say, if the customer wants spicy sauce, add jalapenos. If they don't want spicy sauce, don't add jalapenos. The robot has to check the condition and then decide what to do." "That makes sense," Maya said. "Like, if it's raining, take an umbrella. If it's not raining, don't take an umbrella." "Exactly. You're a natural programmer. But here's where it gets interesting. What if it's raining, but you're only going to be outside for 30 seconds? Then maybe you don't need the umbrella." "Right. So we might add another condition. If it's raining and you'll be outside for more than 2 minutes, take an umbrella. That's called a compound conditional." Maya's eyes lit up. "So programming is just making really detailed plans for every possibility. That's exactly what it is. And the better you get at thinking through all the possibilities, the better your programs work." Sage watched this interaction with growing fascination. Jax wasn't just explaining concepts, he was teaching critical thinking, breaking down complex logic into digestible pieces, making technology accessible through everyday examples that built confidence instead of intimidation. When Maya and her father left with their food, Maya was chattering excitedly about whether traffic lights used conditionals. Sage was still standing at the counter. "That was impressive," she said. "She's a smart kid. They all are, really. Adults make programming seem mysterious, but kids understand logic naturally. They just need someone to show them that they're already using it every day." "Is that what you did in your previous work? Make technology more accessible?" "Something like that. I worked on interfaces for people with disabilities, making sure that everyone can use the same tools, regardless of their physical or cognitive abilities." Sage's lunch arrived, and she took a bite. The Verde chicken was extraordinary. Complex flavors layered in ways that definitely hadn't come from a food truck supplier. "This is incredible. You really made this sauce from scratch. My wife taught me. She said cooking was just chemistry with better rewards. I figured if I could debug code, I could figure out flavor profiles." There was that warmth again when he mentioned his wife. Not avoidance or pain, but integration. He'd found a way to honor her memory while building something new. Sage finished her taco and leaned back against the counter. "Can I ask you something? Don't you miss the technical challenges, the innovation work?" Jax's expression grew thoughtful as he wiped down the counter. "Every day, but my daughter needed stability more than I needed intellectual stimulation. Sometimes being a good parent means choosing the harder path. That's very wise. Some days I feel wise. Other days I feel like I'm just making it up as I go along. But Zoe's taught me that adapting to what people actually need is more valuable than building what I think they should want." Sage laughed. "Welcome to leadership. That feeling never goes away." Something shifted in Jax's expression, a flicker of curiosity. "You sound like you speak from experience." "I do. I run a tech company, and every day I learn something new about the gap between what we think users want and what they actually need." "What kind of company?" "Software development. We focus on tools that help people work better together. I'm constantly amazed by how often the best solutions come from understanding human behavior rather than just technical possibilities." "That makes sense. Technology should amplify human capabilities, not replace human judgment." "Exactly." Sage felt something click into place, a recognition of shared values that went deeper than professional networking. "And I think you and I should have a longer conversation about technology, accessibility, and the future of innovation." Jax studied her face. The same focused attention she remembered from their first meeting. What kind of conversation? The kind that might change both our futures. That evening, Sage sat in her Tesla outside Jax's apartment complex in Greenwood, working up the courage to make a call that could transform two lives. Through her research, she'd learned that Jax lived in a modest two-bedroom place that was exactly what a single father would choose. Safe neighborhood, good schools, reasonable rent, nothing flashy, everything practical. The building was one of those 1970s constructions that prioritized function over form. But the landscaping was well maintained, and she could see playground equipment in the courtyard. A place where kids could be kids, while parents felt secure. Her phone showed Jax's number on the screen, cursor blinking in the message field. What she was about to propose went against every corporate protocol Rebecca had ever taught her. No formal interview process, no committee approval, no background verification period, just instinct and conviction. Sage touched the call button. "Hello?" Jax's voice carried the slight wariness of someone who'd received too many bills-related phone calls lately. "Jax Rivera. This is Sage Montgomery, CEO of TechFlow Dynamics. I believe we met in the rain." A pause, then a soft laugh that carried genuine warmth. "I was wondering if you'd figured that out. I had a feeling there was more to that story when you knew so much about leadership challenges." "Oh, I figured it out. The question is, are you ready to hear about the opportunity you earned today?" "I'm listening." "Good." Sage took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "Here's the thing. My company is facing a hostile takeover by Datacorp Industries. They want to buy us because we're developing technology that threatens their business model." That sounds like a good problem to have. It would be, except they plan to gut our accessibility division and fire most of our development team, essentially turning TechFlow into another data harvesting operation that optimizes profits over people. Jax's voice sharpened with interest. "And you're fighting back?" "Absolutely. But I need someone who understands that technology should serve humanity, not exploit it. Someone with the technical skills to innovate and the character to innovate responsibly." Sage heard what sounded like a chair creaking, as if Jax had sat down heavily. "What exactly are you proposing? A 45-day consulting project, full-time, $20,000 down, with the possibility of a permanent position as Senior Director of Inclusive Technology at $145,000 annually, plus comprehensive benefits." The silence stretched long enough that Sage checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "Sage," he said finally, that's incredibly generous. But I have to ask, is this offer connected to what happened this morning? Because if it is, if you're asking whether I'm offering you charity, the answer is absolutely not. I'm offering you this position because you have exactly the background my company needs, and because you've demonstrated the kind of judgment I want in my leadership team. But you barely know me. Jax, in the last 24 hours, I've reviewed your Microsoft portfolio, spoken to your former colleagues, and watched you turn a food truck into a classroom. I know enough." Another pause. "What would the consulting project involve?" "Developing a comprehensive accessibility platform that integrates with our existing systems. Something that makes our technology genuinely usable for people with different abilities. Think of it as building bridges between human needs and digital solutions." Sage heard what sounded like papers rustling. "That's exactly the kind of work I've wanted to get back to," he said. "But I have to be transparent about something. My daughter comes first, always. If she needs me, I have to be available. I wouldn't respect you if she didn't come first. The position includes flexible scheduling and comprehensive health benefits that cover specialized therapy. How did you—" "Never mind. I probably don't want to know how thorough your research was." Sage smiled. "Let's just say I believe in understanding the people I work with." "And Jax. The therapy coverage isn't charity either. It's good business." Employees who don't have to choose between family needs and work responsibilities are more productive, more creative, and more loyal. I appreciate that perspective. When would this start? Monday morning, 9 a.m., assuming you're interested. The silence this time felt different, not hesitation, but the careful consideration of someone who'd learned not to make impulsive decisions. "Sage," he said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why does this matter so much to you? You could hire any number of experienced accessibility consultants. Why take a chance on someone who's been out of the industry for 18 months? Because the best innovations come from people who understand that technology isn't abstract, it's personal. And because I've seen how you solve problems when it matters." "What do you mean?" "This morning, you had a choice between your career and helping a stranger. You chose helping. That tells me everything I need to know about how you'll approach the work. I just did what felt right. Exactly. And that's exactly what I need in someone who's going to shape how our technology serves people." Jax was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Monday morning, 9 a.m. I'll be there. Excellent. I'll email you the details and building access information tonight. Sage, thank you for the opportunity and for seeing something worth investing in. Thank you for being worth the investment." After the call ended, Sage sat in her car for several minutes, watching lights come on in apartment windows as Seattle settled into evening. In one of those windows, Jax was probably explaining to his daughter that Daddy had found a new job. A job that would let him help people through technology again while still being present for her needs. Tomorrow, she would tell Rebecca about her unilateral hiring decision. Monday, she would introduce Jax to the team and explain why a food truck owner was now their key to beating Data Corp. But tonight, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope, not just for the company, but for the possibility that doing business the right way could actually work. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp March sunshine that made Seattleites remember why they loved their city despite the rain. Jack stood outside the TechFlow building at 8:50, wearing his best interview suit and carrying a leather portfolio that Sarah had given him for his 30th birthday. Inside the portfolio were printed copies of every accessibility project he'd worked on at Microsoft, plus detailed notes about the communication app he'd developed for Zoe. He'd stayed up until 2 a.m. organizing everything, wanting to prove that Sage's faith in him wasn't misplaced. The lobby looked different in the morning light, less imposing, more welcoming. The same receptionist from Friday smiled when she saw him. "Mr. Rivera, welcome back. Ms. Montgomery is expecting you." "Thank you. And thank you for getting my portfolio to the right people on Friday." "Oh, that was easy. Turned out the right person was exactly who you'd hope it would be." She handed him a visitor badge and directed him to the elevator. Sage's office was on the 15th floor, corner suite with windows facing Elliott Bay. When the elevator doors opened, Jax could see her through the glass walls, talking animatedly on the phone while gesturing at something on her computer screen. Rebecca Kim met him in the hallway. "You must be Jax. I'm Rebecca, TechFlow's COO. Sage has told me a lot about you. All good things, I hope. She said you have a talent for making complex problems, simple and difficult decisions, obvious. Around here, that makes you practically magical." Rebecca led him towards Sage's office, stopping at the conference room next door. "The innovation team is gathering for introductions. They're excited to meet you." Through the conference room's glass wall, Jax could see about 8 people around a table, laptops open, coffee cups everywhere. It looked like every productive tech meeting he'd ever attended, and something in his chest loosened with familiar anticipation. Sage ended her phone call and joined them in the hallway. She was wearing dark jeans and a blue sweater that made her eyes even more striking than he remembered. "Good morning, Jax. Ready to change the world?" "That makes sense," he said, then smiled at his own response. "I mean, yes, absolutely. Rebecca and Sage exchanged a look. "That makes sense," Rebecca asked. "It's something I say when I'm processing information," Jax explained. "Usually means I'm connecting dots and seeing how pieces fit together." "I like it," Sage said. "Come meet the team." The conference room introductions went smoothly. Marcus Webb was there, grinning like he'd planned this whole thing. The other team members were a mix of UI designers, back-end developers and product managers, all clearly talented and all clearly curious about the new addition. "Jax," Sage said, standing at the head of the table, "is going to lead our accessibility integration project. His background includes 6 years at Microsoft developing adaptive interfaces, plus 18 months of real-world experience understanding how technology actually impacts families." She clicked to a presentation slide showing user statistics. Currently, 15% of the global population lives with some form of disability. That's over 1 billion people who are underserved by most technology companies. Another slide projected market growth for inclusive design. The accessibility software market is expanding by 34% annually. Companies that build inclusivity into their core products don't just serve more customers, they serve them better. Jax watched Sage present, noting the way she made eye contact with each team member, how she used data to support vision rather than replace it. This was leadership that trusted people to be smart enough to see the bigger picture. "Jax," Sage said, turning to him, "what would you add about the technical challenges?" "The biggest challenge isn't actually technical," Jax said, standing up. "It's philosophical. Most companies treat accessibility as an add-on feature, something you bolt onto existing systems. But real inclusion means designing with different abilities from the beginning." He moved to the whiteboard and drew a simple diagram. If you design a building and then try to add wheelchair accessibility, you get ramps that feel separate and awkward. But if you design universal access from the start, you get solutions that work better for everyone. "Like automatic doors," someone said, "helpful for wheelchairs, but also for people carrying packages or pushing strollers." Exactly. Good, accessible design improves usability for everyone. "What does that look like in software terms?" Marcus asked. "Voice navigation that helps blind users also helps people driving cars. Simplified interfaces for cognitive disabilities also reduce complexity for elderly users or anyone learning new technology. Clear visual design for low-vision users makes everything easier to read." Sage was watching him with an expression that made something warm spread through his chest. Professional appreciation, but also something more personal. The morning flew by in technical discussions and system architecture planning. When the meeting broke up, Jax found himself alone with Sage in the conference room. "That was impressive," she said, gathering her notes. "You made complex accessibility concepts feel achievable instead of overwhelming. That makes sense. I've learned that most people want to do the right thing. They just need to understand what the right thing looks like." There it is again. "That makes sense." "Is that your universal response to new information?" Jax laughed. "My wife used to tease me about it. She said I processed everything through logic before emotion, which wasn't always the most romantic approach." Sage's expression softened. "Do you mind me asking about her? You mention her with such warmth. Sarah was..." "She was the kind of person who made everyone around her better, smarter, kinder, more creative. She saw potential in people and helped them find it." "She sounds wonderful." "She was. And she would have loved this project. Sarah always said technology should amplify human potential, not replace human connection." Sage was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the Seattle skyline. "That's exactly what I'm trying to build here, a company that uses innovation to strengthen communities instead of disrupting them." Something in her voice caught Jax's attention, personal conviction that went deeper than business strategy. Is that why you're fighting the takeover? Because DataCorp wouldn't share that vision. DataCorp sees users as data sources and employees as cost centers. They want to buy TechFlow because our accessibility work threatens their model. If technology becomes truly inclusive, it gets harder to exploit people's limitations. Jax felt that familiar surge of purpose that had driven his best work at Microsoft. This wasn't just a consulting project, it was a chance to build something that mattered. How can I help? Sage smiled, and this time it reached her eyes completely. Build me an accessibility platform that's so elegant and effective that other companies have to adopt similar standards just to compete. That makes sense, Jack said, then caught himself. No, don't apologize. I'm starting to find that phrase reassuring. It means you're connecting pieces and finding solutions. Well then, that makes sense, Jack said deliberately, making her laugh. As they left the conference room together, Jax caught a reflection in the window that surprised him. For the first time in 18 months, he looked like someone who belonged in a tech office. Not because of his clothes or his portfolio, but because of the energy in his posture. The energy of someone working on problems that mattered. 2 weeks into the consulting project, Jax had established a routine that felt sustainable for the first time since Sarah's death. Mornings at TechFlow working with the development team, afternoons coding accessibility features, early evenings with Zoe before her therapy appointments with Dr. Martinez. The work itself was exhilarating. TechFlow's existing codebase was clean and well documented, which meant building accessible features felt like adding instruments to an orchestra rather than forcing square pegs into round holes. The development team was hungry for innovation, and Jax found himself energized by their questions and suggestions, but the real revelation was working with Sage. They'd fallen into a pattern of late afternoon check-ins in her office, ostensibly to review progress, but increasingly becoming conversations about technology philosophy and implementation strategy. Sage had opinions about everything from user interface psychology to the ethics of data collection, and she challenged Jax's assumptions in ways that made his solutions stronger. Today's meeting had run longer than usual because they discovered a fundamental disagreement about navigation design. I think you're overcomplicating it, Sage said, pointing at the wireframe on Jax's laptop screen. Too many menu options will overwhelm users with cognitive processing difficulties. But if we simplify it too much, we patronize users who don't need simplified interfaces. Jax replied. The goal is flexibility, not reduction. They were sitting side by side at the small conference table in Sage's office, close enough that Jax caught hints of her perfume, something light and professional that nonetheless made it harder to concentrate on navigation hierarchies. What if we create adaptive menus, Sage suggested, default to simple, but allow users to unlock more complex options as they become comfortable? That makes sense, Jax said, then realized how close they were sitting. Close enough to see the green flecks in her eyes, close enough to notice that she'd unconsciously leaned toward him while looking at the screen. The moment stretched a beat too long before they both pulled back. Sorry, Sage said, her cheeks flushing slightly. I get intense about design problems. Don't apologize. Intensity is what makes good solutions great. Sage's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and her expression darkened. Problem. Rebecca. The DataCorp acquisition team wants to schedule another meeting. They're getting impatient with our delay tactics. How much time do we have? 3 weeks until the board has to make a final decision. If we can't show significant progress on innovation by then, you'll have to seriously consider selling or watch them attempt a hostile takeover anyway. DataCorp has been buying TechFlow stock on the open market. They're close to having enough shares to force a sale. Jax closed his laptop and turned to face her fully. What do you need from me? A miracle, probably. The board wants to see a working demo of the accessibility platform. Something compelling enough to prove that our innovation trajectory justifies rejecting a 40% premium offer. That makes sense. What's our timeline? 2.5 weeks, which means we need a demo-ready prototype by next Friday. Jax did quick calculations in his head. Feature development, integration testing, user interface polish. It was aggressive but achievable if he focused entirely on core functionality. I can do that. Sage looked at him with something between hope and disbelief. Really? I've been thinking about this problem for 6 years and dreaming about the resources to solve it for 18 months. 2 weeks feels like luxury. What do you need? Direct access to the core development team, priority approval for any system architecture changes, and maybe some very late nights. Done. What else? Jax hesitated, then decided to voice the idea that had been forming during their conversation. I'd like to bring Zoe in to test the interface. Kids see things adults miss, and she's been my best beta tester for accessibility features. You want to bring your daughter to work, if that's okay. She's used to being quiet in professional environments, and her perspective on communication interfaces is actually pretty valuable. Plus, if we're building technology for everyone, we should test it with everyone. Sage was quiet for a moment, and Jax worried he'd overstepped some professional boundary. Then she smiled. I think that's brilliant. When can she come in? Tomorrow afternoon? She has therapy at 4, but could be here from 2 to 3:30. Perfect. I'll make sure the conference room is available and stocked with snacks. As Jax packed up his laptop, Sage walked him toward the elevator. Jax, thank you for taking this seriously, for understanding what's at stake. Thank you for trusting me with something this important. The elevator arrived, and Jax stepped inside. As the doors began to close, Sage reached out to stop them. One more thing. When we beat DataCorp, and we will beat them, I want you to seriously consider staying, not just as a consultant, but as a permanent part of the team. The doors closed before Jax could respond, but his reflection in the polished steel was smiling. For the first time in 18 months, the future felt full of possibilities instead of just obligations. The TechFlow offices hummed with deadline energy at 11 p.m. on Thursday night, 3 days before the board's final decision. Sage walked through the innovation lab, watching her team put finishing touches on the accessibility platform that would either save the company or prove that idealism couldn't compete with corporate greed. Jax sat at his workstation, surrounded by multiple monitors displaying code that looked like digital poetry, lines of functions and variables that would translate human needs into computer understanding. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his hair slightly mussed from running his hands through it, and his focus was so intense that he didn't notice Sage approaching. She studied his profile in the glow of the screens, noting the determined set of his jaw and the way his fingers moved across the keyboard with surgical precision. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd watched him transform from a cautious consultant into a man who owned his expertise completely. "How's it looking?" she asked softly. Jax glanced up, and for a moment his expression was unguarded, tired but exhilarated, like a runner approaching the finish line of a marathon. "Better than I hoped," he said. "The voice navigation system is responding faster than our targets, and the cognitive assistance features are testing beautifully with the beta group." Sage pulled up a chair next to him. "Show me." Jax opened the demo interface, a clean design that somehow managed to be both sophisticated and approachable. "Watch this," he said, clicking through screens that adapted seamlessly to different user needs. A user with motor difficulties could navigate entirely through voice commands. Someone with cognitive processing challenges could choose simplified menus that still accessed full functionality. Visual elements scaled automatically for users with sight limitations, while maintaining aesthetic appeal for everyone else. "This is extraordinary." Sage said, leaning closer to see the details. It doesn't feel like accessible design. It just feels like good design. That makes sense. When you build inclusion from the foundation, it elevates everything. There was that phrase again, but now Sage heard it differently. Not just Jack's processing information, but him recognizing when pieces aligned perfectly. The conference room door opened, and Rebecca appeared with coffee and an expression of controlled worry. "How are we doing?" Rebecca asked, setting down the cups. "Technically, we're golden," Jack said. "The platform is stable, fast, and genuinely innovative. If the board makes decisions based on product quality, we win." Rebecca and Sage exchanged glances. "What aren't you telling me?" Jax asked, reading their expressions. Sage sighed and turned away from the screens. Data Corp made another move today. They've acquired enough shares to force a shareholder vote if the board rejects their offer. Meaning that even if we convince the board that our innovation justifies independence, Data Corp can go directly to shareholders with their 40% premium, and shareholders will vote for money over mission, Jack said quietly. "Most of them probably." Rebecca sat down across from them. "We've got pension funds and institutional investors who have fiduciary duties to maximize returns. So this demo isn't just about proving our innovation," Sage said. "It's about proving that our approach will be more profitable long-term than selling to Data Corp." Jax leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. "What's the timeline for a shareholder vote?" 2 weeks after the board meeting, if they reject the offer. That makes sense. So we need the board to not just approve our direction, but to approve it enthusiastically enough that shareholders trust our strategy over guaranteed money. The weight of that challenge settled over the room like fog. Building great technology was one thing. Convincing investors to bet on principles over immediate profit was something else entirely. Sage felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with impossible stakes. Everything she'd built, every person she employed, every innovation they might develop, all of it balanced on a presentation that had to be perfect. Jax must have seen something in her expression, because he turned his chair to face her directly. "Hey," he said, his voice gentle. "We've got this." "Do we? Because right now it feels like we're trying to prove that doing the right thing can compete with doing the profitable thing, and history suggests—" Sage. Jax reached out and touched her hand, just briefly. "Look at what we've built in 3 weeks." She looked at the screens showing the accessibility platform, then at the rest of the lab where her team had created something unprecedented. "This isn't just good technology," Jax continued. "This is technology that will make every other platform look outdated. We're not asking investors to choose principles over profit. We're showing them that principles create better profits." Rebecca nodded slowly. "He's right. If we can demonstrate market demand for truly inclusive technology, the business case makes itself. But can we do that in a 15-minute board presentation?" Sage asked. "Not with slides and statistics," Jack said, "but we can do it with live demonstration. Real users, real needs, real solutions." "What do you mean? Tomorrow afternoon, Zoe's coming in to test the final interface. What if she's not the only one?" Sage felt something shift in her thinking. "You want to bring actual users to the board meeting. I want to show the board what it looks like when technology actually serves people instead of just extracting value from them." Rebecca was already pulling out her phone. "I can reach out to Dr. Martinez's office. She works with kids and adults who would benefit from this platform, and I know people from my Microsoft days who've been waiting for exactly this kind of innovation," Jax added. Sage felt hope kindle in her chest for the first time in days. Not just hope for the company, but hope for the idea that business could be a force for genuine good. "How many people would we need?" 5 or 6, Jax said. "Enough to show diversity of needs, not so many that it becomes chaotic." "Can we coordinate that in less than 24 hours?" Rebecca grinned, Honey, I've pulled off product launches with less notice than that. As they began planning the logistics, Sage caught herself watching Jax again. The way he approached problems with methodical optimism, how he'd transformed her panicked energy into focused determination. When had she started thinking of challenges as things they faced together instead of burdens she carried alone? The next afternoon, Zoe Rivera sat at the conference table in TechFlow's main meeting room, her small hands navigating the accessibility interface with the serious concentration of a professional tester. Around her, 5 other beta users explored different features of the platform Jax had built. Sage watched from the doorway, struck by how natural this felt. The conference room, usually filled with corporate presentations and strategic discussions, had become a space where technology actually connected with human needs. Dr. Martinez sat next to an elderly man who was testing the voice navigation features. Sarah Chen from Seattle Children's Hospital observed a teenager with cognitive processing delays as she used the simplified interface to complete complex tasks. 2 adults with motor disabilities explored the platform's adaptive controls, and in the center of it all, Zoe worked quietly and efficiently, occasionally pointing to features that could be improved. "She's quite the consultant," Rebecca said, joining Sage in the doorway. "Jax says she has better instincts for user experience than most adults. Too honest to be polite about bad design. How's she doing with speaking? Still mostly non-verbal in new environments. But she's been whispering to Jax more at home, and Dr. Martinez says that's normal progress." They watched as Jax knelt next to his daughter, listening intently as she whispered something in his ear. His face lit up with understanding, and he made notes on his tablet. "What's amazing," Sage continued, "is how patient he is with the process. Never pushing, never showing frustration, just meeting her where she is." Rebecca gave her a sideways look. "You sound like you've given this a lot of thought." "I've given him a lot of thought. Aha. I wondered when you'd admit that." Sage felt heat creep up her neck. "This isn't the time for personal complications. Honey, there's never a convenient time for falling in love. It just happens when it happens." Before Sage could respond, board members began arriving for the presentation. Harrison entered first, followed by 5 others who would decide TechFlow's future. They paused in the doorway, clearly not expecting to find the conference room filled with actual users. "Ms. Montgomery," Harrison said, "this is highly irregular." "Good afternoon, Harrison. I'd like you to meet the people our technology actually serves." Sage moved into the room with the confidence she'd learned to project even when her stomach was twisted with nerves. "Gentlemen, what you're seeing is the real-world testing of our accessibility platform." She introduced each user and explained how they were interacting with the technology. The board members found seats around the edges of the room, watching with expressions that ranged from curiosity to skepticism. Jack stood at the presentation screen, but instead of clicking through slides, he gestured toward the live demonstrations happening around the table. Traditional accessible technology requires users to adapt to systems designed for average abilities, he began. Our platform adapts to users, regardless of their specific needs. He walked over to where the elderly gentleman was using voice commands to navigate complex menus. "Mr. Chen, would you mind showing the board how you're accessing your investment portfolio?" The man spoke clearly into the interface microphone. "Show me my retirement accounts." The screen immediately displayed a clean, readable summary of financial information. "Show me growth projections for healthcare stocks." Another screen appeared with detailed charts that could be magnified or simplified based on the user's preferences. "This same technology helps Sarah navigate her college coursework," Jack said, moving to the teenager's workstation. "Sarah, what are you working on?" "History research paper about civil rights," she said, her words slightly slurred but perfectly understandable to the interface. The system recognized her speech patterns and responded appropriately. Show the board how you organize your research. Sarah demonstrated how she could sort information, create outlines, and dictate text that the system cleaned up automatically while preserving her voice and ideas. Board member Patterson leaned forward with interest. What's the error rate on speech recognition? Less than 2%. And it improves as the system learns individual speech patterns, Jax replied. Sage watched the board members' faces, seeing skepticism give way to genuine engagement. This wasn't theoretical innovation anymore. It was practical technology solving real problems. Dr. Martinez, what's your professional assessment? Sage asked. In 20 years of therapeutic work, I've never seen technology that adapts this fluidly to different communication needs. This platform doesn't just accommodate disabilities, it empowers diverse abilities. The demonstration continued for another 10 minutes, with each user showing different aspects of the platform's capability. When it ended, the conference room fell quiet, except for the soft sounds of people saving their work and preparing to leave. Harrison cleared his throat. Ms. Montgomery, this is impressive technology. But the question remains whether it's profitable technology. Sage had prepared for this moment. Let me show you the market analysis. She moved to the presentation screen and clicked to financial projections. The assistive technology market is currently worth $37 billion and growing at 18% annually. But that only captures people who self-identify as needing accessible solutions. Another click brought up broader demographics. When you design technology that's genuinely easier for everyone to use, your addressable market becomes the entire user base. We're not just serving the disabled community. We're serving parents with sleeping babies, commuters in noisy environments, elderly users learning new systems, and anyone who prefers intuitive interfaces. The numbers on screen showed projected adoption rates and revenue potential. DataCorp wants to buy us to eliminate competition. We want to stay independent to create the new standard for human-computer interaction. Board member Williams spoke up. What about implementation costs? Building this into existing systems seems expensive. Jax stepped forward. Actually, it's more expensive to retrofit accessibility than to build it from the foundation. Our platform reduces overall development costs because you're creating one system that works for everyone instead of multiple versions for different users. He pulled up technical architecture diagrams. Plus, the AI components learn and improve automatically, reducing long-term maintenance costs. Sage watched the board members process this information, seeing the moment when business logic aligned with social impact. The room fell silent as the board members exchanged glances. Finally, Harrison stood. We'll need to discuss this privately, but I think I speak for everyone when I say this presentation exceeded expectations. After the board and beta users had left, Sage found herself alone in the conference room with Jax and Zoe. The little girl was drawing in a notebook, creating what looked like a map of the office building. That was incredible, Sage said, sinking into a chair. I think we actually convinced them. The technology convinced them, Jax replied. We just gave them a chance to see it in action. Zoe looked up from her drawing and made eye contact with Sage for the first time. She whispered something to her father. She wants to show you something, Jax said, his voice soft with surprise. Zoe slid her notebook across the table to Sage. The drawing showed stick figures labeled Daddy, Sage, and Zoe standing in front of a building with Tech Flow written above the door. Hearts floated around all three figures. At the bottom of the page, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, were 2 words. Thank you. Sage felt tears prick her eyes as she looked at the drawing, then at Zoe's shy smile. Thank you, Zoe, Sage whispered back, for helping us make technology that helps everyone. And in that moment, looking at Jax's proud expression and Zoe's bright eyes, Sage realized that winning the board's approval was just the beginning of something much more important. The call came at 8:15 Monday morning, while Sage was reviewing quarterly reports and trying not to think about the board's weekend deliberations. Rebecca's voice on the intercom carried barely contained excitement. "Harrison's here, with the full board. They want to see you in conference room A immediately." Sage's stomach dropped and soared simultaneously. Board members didn't gather at 8 a.m. to deliver routine approvals. Either they were rejecting DataCorp's offer definitively, or they were about to explain why selling was the only viable option. She walked to conference room A with her shoulders back and her expression calm. The same leadership presence she'd cultivated since building TechFlow from her college dorm room. Whatever they decided, she would handle it with grace. The 7 board members sat around the mahogany table with expressions that gave nothing away. Harrison gestured to the chair at the head of the table. "Sage, please sit down." She took her place and waited, hands folded on the table, meeting each board member's eyes with steady confidence. Harrison opened a folder and consulted notes that he probably didn't need. "Over the weekend, we've had extensive discussions about DataCorp's acquisition offer and your alternative proposal for independent innovation." Sage nodded, not trusting her voice yet. "The financial projections for your accessibility platform are compelling. The market analysis demonstrates significant revenue potential, and Friday's demonstration showed technology that could genuinely disrupt the industry." "But," Harrison smiled for the first time since she'd known him. "No buts, Sage. We're rejecting DataCorp's offer." The words hit her like a wave of relief so intense that she had to concentrate on breathing normally. "Furthermore," Harrison continued, "we're approving your budget request for platform development and authorizing the hiring of a full accessibility innovation team." Board member Patterson leaned forward. "With one condition." Sage's relief crystallized into wariness. "What condition?" "We want Jackson Rivera hired permanently as Senior Director of Inclusive Technology. His expertise was clearly the catalyst for this breakthrough, and we can't risk losing him to a competitor." "That makes sense," Sage said, then caught herself using Jax's phrase. "I mean, absolutely. I was planning to make that offer regardless." Williams pulled out another folder. "We've also approved his salary request and the comprehensive benefits package you outlined. TechFlow needs to demonstrate that we value innovation leadership." The meeting continued with logistical details about implementation timelines and quarterly reviews. But Sage's mind was racing ahead to phone calls she needed to make and team meetings she needed to schedule. When the board members finally filed out, leaving her alone in the conference room, Sage allowed herself one moment of pure celebration. She'd saved her company, protected her employees, and proven that business could be both profitable and principled. But more than that, she'd found a partner who shared her vision for what technology could accomplish. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jax. "Zoe wants to know if she can come visit her office friends today. How did the meeting go?" Sage typed back, "Tell Zoe her office friends missed her, and tell her daddy he just got a job offer." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Seriously. Conference room A, now. Bring Zoe if she wants to hear good news." 10 minutes later, Jax appeared in the doorway with Zoe's hand in his. The little girl was carrying her notebook and wearing a T-shirt that said "Future Engineer" in glittery letters. "Good morning," Sage said, standing to greet them. "Ready to hear about your future?" Jax's expression was carefully hopeful. "I'm ready." The board rejected DataCorp's offer. Jax's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Relief, excitement, and something deeper that looked like vindication. They also approved your permanent position as Senior Director of Inclusive Technology. $145,000 annually, full benefits, flexible scheduling, and budget authority for building your own team. Jax sat down heavily in the nearest chair. "Seriously, seriously. They said your expertise was clearly the catalyst for our breakthrough, and they can't risk losing you to a competitor." Zoe tugged on her father's sleeve and whispered something in his ear. She wants to know if this means we get to keep helping people with computers, Jax translated. Yes, sweetheart, Sage said, kneeling to Zoe's eye level. Your daddy is going to help lots of people use technology better, and you can visit whenever you want to test our new ideas. Zoe smiled and opened her notebook to a fresh page. She began drawing immediately, stick figures at computers, surrounded by hearts and smiley faces. Jack stood and extended his hand to Sage. Thank you for believing in the work and for giving me a chance to do it. Thank you for showing me what technology looks like when it serves humanity instead of just harvesting data. They shook hands, but the gesture felt insufficient for the magnitude of what they'd accomplished together. Professional courtesy couldn't contain the partnership they'd built or the future they were about to create. Zoe looked up from her drawing and made a soft sound that drew both adults' attention. She was pointing at her notebook, where she'd drawn Sage and Jax shaking hands while Zoe stood between them. But this drawing was different from her previous work. At the bottom of the page, in careful letters, she'd written a complete sentence, "My family helps people." Sage felt her breath catch. Zoe's first written sentence, and she'd called them a family. Jax knelt beside his daughter, his voice gentle but excited. That's beautiful, honey. Did you write that all by yourself? Zoe nodded, then looked at Sage with bright, confident eyes. Thank you, she said clearly, for helping Daddy smile again. The words hung in the air like a benediction. Simple, honest, and completely transformative. Sage felt tears she hadn't planned on, but they were happy tears. Tears for a little girl finding her voice, for a father finding his purpose, and for a woman discovering that success meant nothing without people to share it with. 3 months later, Sage stood in the same conference room where they'd convinced the board to choose principles over profit. But today, the room buzzed with different energy, celebration instead of desperation. TechFlow's accessibility platform had launched to unprecedented user adoption and industry acclaim. 3 major competitors had already announced their own inclusive design initiatives, trying to match standards that TechFlow had established. The technology press couldn't stop writing about the company that had turned social responsibility into market dominance. But for Sage, the real victory was sitting at the conference table with Zoe, showing her how to use the latest interface updates. What do you think of the voice recognition improvements? Sage asked. It's really good, Zoe said, her words clear and confident. But I think the colors could be brighter for kids who like rainbows. That makes sense. Should we add a rainbow theme option? Yes. And maybe one with unicorns. Sage made a note on her tablet. Unicorn theme. Got it. Anything else? Zoe leaned back in her chair with the serious expression of a professional consultant. The help button should say, I need a friend, instead of contact support. People don't want support. They want friends. Sage felt that familiar flutter of amazement at how children could see solutions that adults missed completely. You're absolutely right. Jax, are you hearing this? Jax looked up from his laptop where he'd been coding the final features for their next platform update. Every word, and I'm already updating the interface copy. This was their routine now. Family dinner at Sage's apartment, followed by collaborative work sessions, where Zoe served as their most insightful beta tester. It had started as professional convenience. Jax needed flexible childcare, and Sage enjoyed Zoe's perspective on user experience. But somewhere along the way, convenience had become something deeper. Daddy, Zoe said, closing her notebook and stretching like a cat. Can we tell Sage about the surprise now? What surprise? Sage asked, looking between father and daughter. Jax set down his laptop and turned to face her fully. Well, Zoe and I have been talking about how much we enjoy spending time here with you. We love you, Zoe announced with 7-year-old directness. And Daddy loves you too, but he's being shy about it. Zoe. Jax's cheeks reddened, but he was smiling. What? It's true. You said so yesterday when you thought I was asleep. Sage felt her heart do something that definitely wasn't professional or rational. But it was wonderful, did he now? She said, trying to keep her voice light. I did, Jax confirmed, his embarrassment giving way to something more serious. And I was hoping, we were hoping, that maybe you might love us back. Sage looked at this man who'd chosen helping a stranger over advancing his career, who'd built technology that served humanity while raising a daughter with infinite patience and wisdom. Then she looked at Zoe, whose bright eyes and recently found voice had taught them all that healing happened in community. I do love you both, Sage said simply, more than I knew was possible. Zoe clapped her hands together. Perfect. So now we're officially a family. Is that how it works? Sage asked, laughing. That's exactly how it works, Jax said, reaching for her hand. Unless you prefer a more traditional proposal process. Are you proposing? I'm saying that I've found my partner in every sense of the word, professional, personal, and parental, if you're interested in making it official. Sage squeezed his hand, looking around the conference room where they'd fought to save the company and ended up saving each other. That makes sense, she said, using his phrase deliberately, and for the first time in her adult life, everything actually did. 18 months after the rainy day that changed everything, Sage Montgomery Rivera stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of TechFlow's new headquarters, watching Seattle wake up under March sunshine that felt like a promise kept. The building hummed with the energy of 450 employees working on technology that actually mattered, and the view stretched across Elliott Bay to remind her daily that some horizons were worth fighting for. The morning news played on the conference room screen behind her, featuring TechFlow's latest accessibility breakthrough. Tech Accessibility Pioneer wins Congressional Innovation Award. The headline read, accompanied by footage of Jax accepting recognition for software that had transformed how 2.7 million people interacted with technology worldwide. But what made Sage smile wasn't the award or the media attention. It was the moment in the video when Jax had looked directly into the camera and said, innovation happens when we stop asking what technology can do and start asking what people need it to do. My wife taught me that business should serve communities, and my daughter taught me that the best solutions come from listening to the people who need them most. Her husband understood that building the future meant centering humanity, not just advancing capability. The office around her reflected that philosophy. Workstations were designed for different physical abilities. Lighting could be adjusted for various visual needs, and sound dampening zones accommodated employees with sensory processing differences. TechFlow hadn't just created accessible technology, they'd become an accessible workplace that other companies studied and emulated. Rebecca Kim knocked and entered, carrying coffee and the morning briefings that had become their ritual. Though as COO, Rebecca could have delegated these updates. She preferred the collaboration that had built TechFlow's culture from the beginning. Good morning, Rebecca said, setting down Sage's cup and settling into her usual chair. Ready for today's dose of excellent problems? Absolutely. What kind of excellent problems are we solving today? The European Union wants to make our accessibility standards mandatory for all technology companies operating in their markets. Apparently, our platform has become the benchmark for inclusive design globally. Sage felt the familiar flutter of pride mixed with responsibility. When you set new standards, the world expected you to keep raising them. That's incredible recognition. What's the timeline for implementation? 18 months, which means every major tech company in the world will need to adopt similar approaches or lose access to European markets worth $600 billion annually. That makes sense, Sage said, unconsciously using Jax's phrase that had become part of her vocabulary. How's our development pipeline looking for scaling internationally? Robust and then some. Jax's team has built the platform to be culturally adaptable while maintaining core accessibility principles. We can customize interfaces for different languages, cultural contexts, and regional regulations without compromising functionality. Through the window, Sage could see the original TechFlow building, where they'd fought to save the company from Data Corp's acquisition. That fight felt simultaneously distant and immediate. Distant because they'd grown so far beyond survival mode. Immediate because the values they'd defended still guided every decision. Speaking of international expansion, Rebecca continued, consulting her tablet. We've got requests from companies in 12 countries wanting to license our platform. The Japanese partnership alone could generate $40 million in revenue over 2 years. What's our capacity for that level of growth? With Jax's university appointment providing access to graduate student researchers, we're in good shape. Plus, Dr. Martinez's team has been training accessibility consultants who can handle implementation support. And speaking of Dr. Martinez, Rebecca said with a grin, how's our favorite 8-year-old handling her new role as Chief Student Experience Officer? Sage laughed. Zoe takes her unofficial title very seriously. Yesterday, she submitted a formal report about why the employee break room needs better lighting for people who get headaches from fluorescent bulbs. Did she really submit a formal report, complete with charts, user testimonials, and a cost-benefit analysis? She learned spreadsheet basics from Marcus and has been applying them to everything. That girl is going to run a company someday. She's already influencing this one in ways that make us better. Her perspective on user experience comes from actually needing technology to work, instead of just wanting it to be convenient. Sage walked back to her desk, where family photos shared space with industry awards and patent certificates. The largest frame held a picture from their wedding 6 months ago, a small ceremony in the courtyard of Zoe's school, surrounded by the students who'd become beta testers for TechFlow's educational accessibility tools. In the photo, Zoe stood between Sage and Jax, wearing a dress she'd designed herself and holding a bouquet of artificial flowers she'd insisted on because real flowers made her sad to watch them die. Her smile was radiant and confident, the expression of a child who'd learned that her voice mattered and her ideas had value. The wedding had been perfect in its simplicity. No corporate sponsors or industry networking, just family and friends celebrating love that had grown from shared values and mutual respect. Zoe had served as both flower girl and ring bearer, because she'd announced that traditional gender roles were silly and she wanted to do both jobs. How's the morning looking? Rebecca asked, checking her phone for calendar updates. Team meeting at 9 to review the school district pilot program results. Then I'm joining Jax's research discussion with the University of Washington about expanding accessibility curriculum across all engineering programs. How's he feeling about the university appointment? Excited and slightly overwhelmed. Teaching 2 graduate courses while maintaining his innovation leadership here isn't exactly a light workload, but it's the right kind of challenge for him. Absolutely. He thrives when he's solving complex problems that help people. Plus, having university-affiliated research legitimizes our work in academic circles. The intercom buzzed with the receptionist's voice, Ms. Montgomery Rivera. Your husband is here with the morning design review team. Sage smiled at how naturally everyone had adapted to her hyphenated name. Some traditions were worth updating, and some changes strengthened rather than complicated identity. She'd kept Montgomery to honor her professional reputation and family heritage, but added Rivera to celebrate the family she'd chosen and been chosen by. Send them to conference room B. We'll be right there. As they walked toward the meeting, Rebecca glanced at Sage with the expression that meant she had something personal to discuss. Can I ask you something that's none of my business? You've never let that stop you before. How do you balance everything? running a company that's becoming a global standard setter, being a stepmother to a precocious 8-year-old, maintaining a marriage with someone who's equally driven, staying involved in Zoe's continued therapy progress, leading industry innovation initiatives, and somehow still having time for romantic dinners and family game nights. Sage paused in the hallway, considering the question that she'd asked herself frequently during the transition, Daffy. From independent CEO to family-oriented leader. I don't balance it, she said finally. I integrate it. Jax's work makes my company stronger because his innovations drive our competitive advantage. Zoe's perspective makes our products better because she identifies user needs that adults miss completely. My business success provides stability for their healing and growth, which creates the security they need to take creative risks. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. So you're not juggling separate priorities. We're building a life where everything reinforces everything else. When Jax succeeds at university, it brings academic credibility to TechFlow. When TechFlow wins industry recognition, it validates Jax's research approach. When Zoe thrives in school and social situations, it proves that our accessibility work has real impact on families like ours. That sounds like the kind of answer that works in theory, but gets complicated in practice. Some days are more complicated than others, Sage admitted. But we've learned that supporting each other's success creates more opportunities than competing for individual achievement. Plus, we've got great systems now. What kind of systems? Calendar integration that respects everyone's priorities. Family meetings where Zoe gets equal vote on major decisions. Work boundaries that protect personal time, and most importantly, the understanding that flexibility serves everyone better than rigid expectations. They reached conference room B, where Jax was setting up wireframe prototypes while his team gathered around the table. Dr. Martinez sat next to Marcus Webb, both reviewing user feedback forms from the latest school district trials. Two new developers, recent graduates who'd specifically sought out TechFlow because of its reputation for meaningful innovation, waited with notebooks and expressions of eager professionalism. The team had grown significantly since the early days when Sage and Jax had worked late nights refining accessibility features. Now they had specialists in therapeutic technology, educational interface design, international compliance, and user experience research. But the collaborative spirit remained the same. Sage watched Jax orchestrate the meeting with the same steady competence she'd first witnessed during their roadside encounter. He'd grown into leadership naturally, not by dominating conversations, but by asking questions that helped others articulate their best ideas and connecting different perspectives into comprehensive solutions. "Good morning, everyone," Sage said, taking her seat at the table. "What innovations are we perfecting today?" "The school integration project," Jax replied, clicking to the first prototype screen. "We're testing whether our communication platform can adapt to classroom environments without disrupting normal educational flow or creating additional work for teachers." Dr. Martinez leaned forward, consulting printed reports. "The preliminary results are encouraging. Students with communication challenges are participating more actively in class discussions, but we're also seeing unexpected benefits for neurotypical children, such as they're developing better empathy for different communication styles. When the technology normalizes diverse ways of expressing ideas, students become more patient with each other's differences and more creative about collaborative problem solving." "That makes sense," Sage said. "We're not just building accessible technology. We're building inclusive communities where diversity of thought and communication becomes an asset rather than a challenge." "Exactly." Marcus pulled up user statistics on his laptop. Teacher reports show improved classroom dynamics, better collaborative learning outcomes, and reduced behavioral issues across the board. Kids are kinder to each other when they understand that everyone has different strengths. What about implementation challenges? Sage asked. The biggest issue is adult resistance to change, not technical difficulties, Dr. Martinez replied. Some teachers worry that accessibility accommodations will slow down their curriculum pace or require specialized training they don't have time for. How are we addressing that concern? Professional development workshops that show teachers how inclusive design actually reduces their workload, Jax explained. When technology handles accommodation automatically, teachers can focus on teaching instead of managing different systems for different students. Plus, Dr. Martinez added, we're documenting improved test scores and learning outcomes in classrooms using our platform. Data convinces administrators even when philosophy doesn't. The meeting continued with technical discussions about interface refinements, deployment strategies, and integration with existing educational technology systems. But Sage found herself struck by the evolution of their work. They'd started with the goal of making technology accessible to people with disabilities. They'd ended up creating tools that improved communication and collaboration for everyone. One of the new developers, Sarah Chen, no relation to the doctor. Sarah Chen from Seattle Children's Hospital raised her hand tentatively. I have a question about long-term sustainability. As our platform becomes more sophisticated, how do we prevent it from becoming too complex for the users who need simplicity most? Excellent question, Jack said. Zoe actually identified this challenge during her testing last week. She said that grown-ups always want to add more buttons when they should be making better buttons. Everyone laughed, but the insight was profound. Zoe's perspective as both a user and a developing person gave her unique awareness of how technology could enhance or complicate human experience. Our approach is modular complexity, Sage explained. Core functionality remains simple and intuitive, but users can access advanced features as their needs and comfort levels develop. Like training wheels on a bicycle, Marcus added, present when needed, invisible when not, and removable when the user is ready for full functionality. After the team dispersed to implement the morning's decisions, Sage and Jax remained in the conference room, reviewing notes and planning the afternoon's school visit where Zoe would present her research to her classmates and teachers. How's she feeling about being the official student representative? Sage asked. Excited and nervous in equal measure. She practiced her presentation 3 times last night, complete with hand gestures, visual aids, and a contingency plan for technical difficulties. She's inherited your thoroughness and your flair for communication. Jack smiled, the expression that still made Sage's heart skip slightly, even after 2 years of partnership. She's inherited your confidence about speaking to authority figures and your belief that good ideas deserve professional presentation. That's a beautiful combination of traits. Yesterday, she called the school principal to suggest improvements to the morning announcement system, complete with research about how current announcements create anxiety for students with auditory processing challenges. Did she really call the principal directly, complete with a PowerPoint presentation that she emailed ahead of time? Ms. Rodriguez said it was the most professional accessibility consultation she'd ever received from anyone, let alone an 8-year-old. That's our girl, always identifying problems and proposing solutions instead of just complaining about what's broken. Speaking of solutions, Jack said, shifting to a tone that suggested transition to personal topics, I have something I want to discuss with you. What kind of something? The kind that involves long-term planning and potentially significant life changes that would affect all 3 of us. Sage felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with caution. Their marriage was still new enough that major discussions required careful navigation, but mature enough that she trusted Jax's judgment about timing and priorities. I'm listening. Jax pulled out his phone and showed her an email from the University of Washington. They've offered me a joint appointment between the Computer Science Department and the School of Medicine, teaching accessibility design while conducting research on technology-assisted communication therapy. That's incredible recognition of your expertise. What would it involve specifically? 2 days per week on campus, 3 days at TechFlow. Graduate student supervision, curriculum development, research publication, and collaboration with the medical school on therapeutic applications. Plus, speaking opportunities at conferences and consultation with other universities developing similar programs. Sage felt excitement building as she processed the implications. This isn't just a career opportunity. It's a chance to institutionalize everything you've learned about human-centered technology design and scale your impact beyond what any single company could achieve. Exactly. But it would mean changes to our routine, adjustments to my availability here, potential travel for conferences and research presentations, and probably some evening work when students need guidance. Changes that would make you even more effective in both roles, Sage said without hesitation. Academic credibility would strengthen your industry influence, and industry experience would enrich your teaching in ways that benefit students and advance the field. You're not concerned about the time commitment or the potential disruption to our family schedule. Jax, you've spent 2 years proving that you can balance professional excellence with family dedication while building a marriage and helping your daughter heal from trauma. I trust your judgment about what's sustainable. She reached across the table and took his hand, noting how natural the gesture had become and how his presence made every challenge feel manageable. Besides, having a university professor in the family enhances TechFlow's academic partnerships and research credibility. And Zoe would love having a dad who teaches college students about the same accessibility principles she helps test. So you think I should accept? I think you should accept if it aligns with your goals and values. And I think we should celebrate this recognition of how far you've come from the food truck owner who thought his tech career was over. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands linked across the conference table where they'd collaborated on dozens of projects and hundreds of decisions that had shaped both their company and their relationship. "There's something else," Jax said, his voice carrying a different kind of uncertainty. "What else?" "Dr. Martinez thinks Zoe is ready to participate in a research study about children who've recovered from selective mutism, sharing her story to help other families understand that healing is possible and trauma doesn't have to define a child's future. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity for her to help other kids going through similar challenges. It would involve interviews about her experience, possibly some media attention, definitely putting her recovery journey in the public record, and potentially speaking at conferences about childhood trauma and technology-assisted therapy. Sage considered the complexity of this decision, Zoe's privacy and normal childhood versus her potential impact on other children struggling with similar challenges, balanced against her own expressed desire to help others. What does Zoe think about it? She wants to do it. She says other kids should know that losing your voice doesn't mean losing your smart thoughts, and that technology can help people communicate while they're learning to talk again. That's very wise and very characteristic of her empathy and problem-solving approach. Dr. Martinez would supervise everything to ensure it's therapeutic rather than exploitative. The research would focus on positive outcomes and recovery strategies rather than trauma details. But it would mean more visibility for our family and potentially some scrutiny of our parenting choices. Sage thought about the trajectory that had brought them from strangers, helping each other in the rain, to partners building technology that served millions of users worldwide. Visibility had always been part of their story, and using their experience to help others felt consistent with their values. I think we should support whatever Zoe feels called to do. She's spent years learning to use her voice again through therapy, technology, and tremendous personal courage. If she wants to use that voice to help other children find theirs, that's beautiful and important. Even if it means interviews, media attention, and potential invasion of privacy, especially if it means that we've always believed that sharing knowledge amplifies its impact. If Zoe's story can help other families navigate trauma and recovery, then telling it becomes an act of service. What about the academic implications for my university appointment? Having a family member who's contributed to therapeutic technology research would strengthen your credibility, not undermine it. Plus, Zoe's insights have directly improved our platform design. She's essentially been conducting user experience research for years. Their conversation was interrupted by Sage's phone buzzing with a text from Zoe. "Daddy and Sage, I'm ready for the school meeting. I practiced my presentation for Mrs. Johnson, and she said I sound very professional, and my ideas could help lots of kids. Also, can we get ice cream after to celebrate good teamwork? I think Mr. Peterson from the coffee shop would like to hear about our project too." Jax laughed as he read the message over Sage's shoulder. "Very professional ice cream celebration with community outreach. That sounds like a comprehensive plan. She's become quite the networker," Sage observed. "Mr. Peterson is the elderly gentleman from Pike Place Roasters who started asking her advice about technology after she helped him set up voice texting on his phone. And now, she considers him part of her informal advisory board on accessibility challenges facing older adults." "That makes sense," Sage replied, using their family's shared phrase deliberately. Her research benefits from diverse perspectives, and she's learned that good ideas can come from anyone if you ask the right questions. The afternoon school visit exceeded every expectation that Sage and Jax had carefully managed. Zoe stood at the front of her classroom, presenting the new communication platform to her 23 classmates with the poise of someone much older and the enthusiasm of someone her actual age. She demonstrated features, answered questions, and facilitated feedback with natural leadership that made both parents glow with pride. "This technology helped me find my voice again after my mum died," she told her classmates. "And now it can help all of us share our ideas better. Even if we think differently, or communicate differently, or move differently, we all have important things to say." The students tested various features with enthusiasm and insight that surprised the adult observers. They identified interface improvements that professional developers had missed, suggested new functionalities based on their actual usage patterns, and collaborated on solutions with the kind of creative problem-solving that reminded everyone why children made excellent technology consultants. 8-year-old Marcus, who'd been named after Marcus Webb from TechFlow, suggested that the voice recognition system should understand whispers for kids who got shy in class. 10-year-old Sarah recommended visual timers for students who needed help managing task transitions. 7-year-old David, who used a wheelchair, proposed gesture controls for users who couldn't operate traditional keyboards. Every suggestion was thoughtful, practical, and based on real user needs rather than theoretical improvements. Mrs. Rodriguez, the school principal, observed the entire session and took extensive notes. "This is remarkable," she told Sage and Jax afterward. "I've never seen students this engaged in technology discussion or this sophisticated in their feedback. They're thinking like designers and advocates simultaneously. That's what happens when you include users in the development process instead of designing for them without them," Jax explained. "Zoe has taught us that the best accessibility solutions come from listening to the people who actually need them," Sage added. After the presentation, as they walked to their car for the promised ice cream celebration, Zoe skipped between Sage and Jax with obvious satisfaction and barely contained energy. "How do you think that went?" Sage asked. "Really good. Everyone had smart ideas, and Mrs. Rodriguez said we could use the communication platform for our next group project about community improvement." "What kind of group project? We're going to research accessibility in our neighborhood and present solutions to the city council, like how to make playgrounds more fun for kids who use wheelchairs, or how to make crosswalk signals better for people who can't see them, or how to make bus stops more comfortable for people who have trouble standing for long times. Sage stopped walking and knelt to Zoe's eye level. That's an incredible project idea. You're going to help make the whole city more accessible and inclusive for everyone. That's what our family does, right? We help people with technology and ideas and kindness, and we help them help other people too. That's exactly what our family does. At the ice cream shop, a local place called Scoops and Stories that supported community events and employed teenagers with developmental disabilities, they found a corner booth where Zoe could spread out her notebook and continue developing ideas for the Neighborhood Accessibility Project. The booth had become their regular spot for family planning sessions and homework time. Sage and Jax watched her work with the mixture of amazement and affection that had become their default parental state. Zoe approached problem-solving with methodical creativity, listing challenges on one side of her notebook and potential solutions on the other, complete with cost estimates and implementation timelines she'd learned from observing their business meetings. She's remarkable, Sage said quietly. She's learned that her perspective matters and her ideas have value, Jax replied. That's the most important lesson any kid can learn, and the foundation for everything else she'll accomplish. They were interrupted by a commotion near the shop's entrance. An elderly man with a walker was struggling to navigate the heavy door while balancing an umbrella against the sudden spring rain that had begun falling. His movements were careful but frustrated, and he paused several times to adjust his grip on both the walker and the door handle. Several customers glanced up from their conversations, but continued eating and talking. The man paused again, clearly weighing whether to continue fighting the door or retreat to his car and drive home without the ice cream he'd probably been looking forward to. Zoe looked up from her notebook, assessed the situation in seconds, and immediately stood up. "We should help him," she announced with the matter-of-fact tone she used for obvious conclusions. Without waiting for adult permission or discussion about stranger safety, she walked to the entrance and held the door open with both hands. "Hi, coming out of the rain. I'm Zoe and that's my family. We like helping people, and you look like you could use help with this heavy door." The elderly man's face brightened as he entered the shop, shaking raindrops from his umbrella. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's very kind of you. This door is definitely designed for people with better coordination than I have these days. Do you want to sit with us? We have a big table and we're working on ideas to make our neighborhood better for everyone. You might have good suggestions because you know about things that are hard for older people." The man's expression shifted from gratitude to genuine interest. "What kind of ideas are you working on? Ways to help people who move differently, or see differently, or hear differently? My daddy builds technology that helps people communicate, and my mom runs the company that makes it happen. I'm the kid consultant who tests everything to make sure it actually works." Sage felt her heart swell at hearing herself referred to as "my mum" so naturally and with such obvious pride. The title she'd never expected to hold had become the identity that mattered most to her. "What's your name?" Zoe continued with the directness that made her an excellent interviewer. "Robert Chen. I'm retired, but I used to be an urban planner for the city. I spent 40 years trying to make Seattle more accessible and user-friendly for people of all ages and abilities." Zoe's eyes widened with excitement. "That's perfect. You know about city planning, and I know about kid perspectives and technology solutions. We should definitely work together." As Zoe led Mr. Chen to their table and began explaining the accessibility project with professional thoroughness, Sage caught Jax's eye. He was wearing the expression of quiet pride mixed with slight bewilderment that meant he was watching his daughter exceed his expectations again. The conversation that followed stretched for over an hour, with Mr. Chen offering insights about city infrastructure, accessibility regulations, and implementation challenges that hadn't occurred to Zoe despite her thorough research. She took careful notes, asked thoughtful follow-up questions, and clearly considered him a valuable addition to her research team. "You know, Mr. Chen said as Zoe showed him her notebook diagrams, "In all my years of urban planning, I never thought to ask 8-year-olds about accessibility design, but your ideas about playground equipment and bus stop seating are more innovative than most proposals I've seen from professional consulting firms. That's because kids know what they need, but grown-ups sometimes forget to ask us," Zoe replied matter-of-factly. "What would you think about presenting your research to the City Planning Commission?" Mr. Chen asked. "I still have connections there, and they're always looking for fresh perspectives on accessibility improvements. Could I really do that?" "Absolutely. Your research is thorough, your solutions are practical, and your perspective is exactly what city planners need to hear. Plus, having a kid advocate for inclusive design would get media attention that might help fund your proposed improvements." Sage leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, would you be willing to mentor Zoe through the presentation process, help her prepare, and maybe co-present with her?" "I would be honored," he replied immediately. "It's been years since I worked on something this important with someone this passionate about making a difference." When Mr. Chen finally left, after exchanging contact information and promising to attend Zoe's eventual city council presentation, the family sat in comfortable silence, processing what had just happened. "That was beautiful," Sage said finally. Zoe beamed with satisfaction. He had really good ideas about bus stops and sidewalk designs and how to make crosswalks safer for people who can't see the signals. "I'm going to email him my presentation outline tonight." "How did you know to invite him to sit with us?" Jax asked with genuine curiosity. He looked lonely and frustrated, and lonely people usually have interesting stories and good ideas if you give them a chance to share. "Plus, Daddy always says that the best solutions come from talking to lots of different people who have different experiences." "That makes sense," Sage and Jack said simultaneously, then laughed at their synchronization. "Also," Zoe continued, "it's raining and he needed help with the door, and ice cream makes everyone happier, so it was obvious that we should help and include him." The drive home took them through the same Seattle neighborhoods where their story had begun, past the intersection where Sage's Tesla had stalled in the rain 20 months earlier. The Tesla still ran perfectly, but now it was equipped with emergency supplies, jumper cables, and a roadside assistance kit, because helping stranded motorists had become a family tradition that they practiced regularly. The car also carried Zoe's emergency communication device, coloring books for entertaining children during long waits, and business cards for TechFlow's accessibility platform, because they'd learned that opportunities to help people often led to opportunities to share resources that could help even more people. As they pulled into their driveway, the house they'd bought together in Wallingford, with enough space for Jax's home office, Zoe's art studio, and the garden where Sage had discovered she enjoyed growing vegetables, Sage reflected on the completeness of their transformation. She'd started as a CEO, fighting to save her company from corporate acquisition while working 18-hour days and eating takeout dinners alone in her office. She'd become a leader, proving that business could serve humanity while generating sustainable prosperity, with a family that made success meaningful and a home that felt like sanctuary. Jax had started as a grieving widower, choosing his daughter's needs over his career advancement, believing his professional life was effectively over. He'd become an innovator whose work touched millions of lives while building a new kind of family that honored his first wife's memory and created space for new love. Zoe had started as a traumatized child who'd lost her voice along with her mother, retreating into silence and art as her primary forms of communication. She'd become a confident advocate for inclusion and accessibility, using her experience to help others find their own voices while building relationships with adults who valued her perspectives. That evening, as they settled into their routine of family dinner followed by collaborative work time, Sage found herself thinking about legacy in ways that had nothing to do with corporate achievements or industry recognition. Not the professional legacy of successful companies or innovative products, but the human legacy of lives touched, futures improved, and cycles of kindness that would continue long after they were gone. Tomorrow, TechFlow's accessibility platform would help thousands of people communicate more effectively, navigate technology more easily, and participate more fully in work and education. Next week, Jax would begin teaching university students how to design technology that served human needs rather than creating dependency. Next month, Zoe would present her neighborhood accessibility research to the City Planning Commission with Mr. Chen as her co-presenter and mentor. And someday, when other families faced storms, literal or metaphorical, they would have the tools, knowledge, and community connections to help each other with confidence and competence. "What are you thinking about?" Jax asked, noticing her contemplative mood as they cleaned up after dinner while Zoe arranged her homework and project materials at the kitchen table. "Legacy," Sage said. "How the choices we make create ripples that extend far beyond what we can see or measure. How helping one person in the rain can change the trajectory of dozens of lives over time. Good ripples or concerning ripples? Good ripples. Beautiful ripples. The kind that make other people's lives a little easier or a little brighter and teach them to create their own ripples of kindness." Zoe looked up from her homework. "Like when we helped Mr. Chen today. And he's going to help me with city planning. And then we're going to help other people by making the city better for everyone, exactly like that," Sage confirmed. "When you help someone, they're more likely to help someone else. When you share knowledge, it grows instead of disappearing. When you choose kindness, it multiplies." "That makes sense," Zoe said, unconsciously using the family phrase that had become their verbal signature. "It's like compound interest, but for good feelings instead of money." Jax and Sage stared at their 8-year-old daughter, who was apparently developing sophisticated understanding of both emotional intelligence and financial concepts simultaneously. "Where did you learn about compound interest?" Jax asked. "Marcus Webb explained it when I asked him why TechFlow keeps growing, even when we're not trying to make it bigger. He said, good ideas and good people attract more good ideas and good people, and eventually you have enough good stuff that it keeps growing by itself. That's actually a very accurate description of sustainable business growth," Sage said with amazement. "And a pretty good explanation of how happiness works too," Zoe added matter-of-factly. An hour later, as they tucked Zoe into bed in the room she decorated with her own artwork, family photos, and a world map marked with pins showing every location where TechFlow's accessibility platform was being used, she made a request that had become ritual. "Tell me the storm story," she said, settling into her pillows with the stuffed elephant that had been her constant companion since her mother's death. It was a story they'd told dozens of times, with details that had been polished through repetition into family mythology. The story of how Daddy chose to help a stranger in the rain instead of protecting his job interview. How the stranger turned out to be the CEO who would change their lives. How helping each other had created a family that was stronger than the sum of its parts. Once upon a time, Jax began, there was a good man who faced an impossible choice between doing what was safe and doing what was right. And he chose right, Zoe continued. Because that's what good people do, even when it's hard and even when they're scared about the consequences. And the universe rewarded his choice by bringing him exactly the person he needed to meet, Sage added. A woman who was also choosing to do what was right instead of what was easy, And they discovered that when you help other people, you help yourself too, Zoe concluded. And they learned that the best families are the ones you choose and the ones who choose you back. And they lived helpfully ever after. That makes sense, all three of them said together. The phrase that had become their family benediction and their shared commitment to approaching life with logic, compassion, and optimism. Later, as Sage and Jack sat on their back porch watching Seattle's lights twinkle across the landscape like earthbound stars, Sage felt the deep satisfaction of a life aligned with its values and a future full of possibilities for continued growth and service. "No regrets?" Jax asked, as if reading her thoughts. "None. You. Only that it took a rainstorm and a broken-down car to bring us together. I wish we'd found each other sooner so we could have had more time to build this life together." "Maybe we wouldn't have been ready for each other sooner," Sage replied thoughtfully. "Maybe we needed to become the people we are, you through loss and recovery, me through building and defending something I believed in, before we could appreciate the people we were meant to be with." "That makes sense, too. And besides, we've got decades ahead of us to keep building and growing and helping people together." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked on the porch swing that Jax had installed last summer, watching the city they'd helped make more accessible and inclusive. Somewhere out there, people were using technology that Jax had designed with Sage's vision and Zoe's insights. Somewhere out there, other families were learning that helping strangers could change everything. Somewhere out there, children with communication challenges were finding their voices with tools that had been built by people who understood that technology should serve humanity rather than replace it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to serve communities while advancing human capability through innovation. The university appointment would expand their impact into academic research and education. The international expansion would bring inclusive design principles to markets across 6 continents. Zoe's research would influence city planning decisions that could improve life for thousands of residents. But tonight, in the home they'd built together, surrounded by the family they'd chosen and been chosen by, everything was exactly as it should be. And in the distance, clouds were gathering for another spring storm, carrying the promise of new chances to help each other through whatever weather life might bring. The cycle continued, as beautiful cycles do, with endless opportunities for kindness to create the next chapter of the story. The rain, when it finally came, sounded like applause. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.